Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I am nearly joined by Quentin Tarantino, but not quite Tarantino. So welcome to the show, Quentin.
Hello,
how are you?
Thank you. I'm very good. I'm confined here in Belgium, enjoying a quieter time and moments to reflect on management issues. So very happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm sure people in Belgium, or some people in Belgium, know about you, but worldwide, some people still don't. So would you mind giving me a little bit of an update, or telling me and the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do and what you like doing and so on?
Absolutely. So I've had the chance since 10 years now to be involved and to explore the field of collective intelligence and participatory management. So it has grown from something that was very new to me when I came out of business school to a real passion of how to have people that are physically present or in these days remotely working together. How can we build a sense of community and a sense of belonging where people feel engaged? So for these 10 years, I've been exploring that question. I've been reading a lot, experimenting really a lot of different things within companies, outside of companies. So how to create those modern communities. And since 4 years now, I've created a company called Mango Chutney, who is actually taking care of mostly small and medium businesses in how they organize in the daily life. So how can they become efficient? How can they stimulate engagement? Knowing the figures from Gallup that roughly it's 15% people are engaged in companies, 60-ish people are disengaged, and the rest is actively disengaged. So with this type of figures, our modern workplaces are not really thriving workplaces. So my aim is to bring back this vibration and this motivation back at work, and that people feel good when they go to work. Certainly in these times where more and more people tend to look a bit backward, to take a step back and to wonder, is it really what I want? Is it really how I want to continue to work? What are the alternatives? So it's definitely a good moment to discuss about all these things.
Excellent. That sounds exciting. I mean, I've obviously worked in management many years myself, and I'm really excited to hear all the sort of good ideas and so on that you share. I think it's always, as a business owner as well, it's always interesting to get different takes. And one of the key things that I've always focused on is making sure that people do things in many different ways, and what works for one person might not work for someone else. But that's also why in management in particular, it's really important to share different ways of doing things, because even though it might not necessarily reflect to everyone, it could be very relevant for some people, right?
That's what I love about one of the practices I love is called counsel. It's actually coming from California, the way of counsel, and it's a practice of sharing stories. And it's not about convincing the other or something. It's about hearing the story of how someone did it to really indeed be impregnated by it and foster new ideas and new possibilities. And by sharing stories, also you create this community, you create a relationship with the other. So very good ideas that you have to have this podcast going.
Excellent. So how do you generally view, like if we take management as an overall, how do you look at management, like as a business owner and so on? What's sort of your high level view on management in general and your sort of methods or methodology around it?
There is a first thing, definitely in Europe, it's big. I don't know if it's in the rest of the world. The word management is becoming a bit, I wouldn't say outdated, but people feel I have a manager, and the manager is this guy that's going to be controlling you, doing micromanagement, that is setting you objectives and after you using controlling methods to get you things done. I feel more and more people, and what we hear here is that people usually leave their company because of their manager. and because thus of management. So it's a term I'm using less and less. It's a term that is then going by, more and more towards what is called leadership. So how do you lead a team? How do you inspire a team? How do you create a context where people will get to a certain destination in a aligned manner? And this is definitely what I'm bringing to leaders. Is usually this path from, okay, I'm a manager, to and what effect it has and how happy I'm to be a manager. Because when I dig with many managers, they're not really that happy to be the one that is always controlling, always having to yell at people when it's needed or this and that. So it's not that comfortable, though it might have some prestige. So it's often when I'm working with people with already a role to manage people, it's what is being myself as manager right now, and what would I really want to become. And usually then it comes closer to leadership, which means having a team, and there is this role that is described in either holacracy or sociocracy, which are ways of organizing teams and organizations that are more based on roles and on transparency and new ways of operating together. Yeah. And sociocracy, for instance, and holacracy are talking about a first link, which is a good definition for this new kind of leader that is emerging. The first link is actually the person is the first to be linked to the purpose of either the organization or the team that you are in. So that's the first thing. So being linked to that is the person responsible to stay connected to the purpose, to where we go, to this vision, and to translate it into an operational thing. So to really channelize it and bring it to the team, to say, okay, this is the direction. That's the first thing. And for this, the leader needs to take time. That's one of the biggest fights I have every day is with all the companies I'm working with, is always for the leader to, because usually it's small and medium businesses, so they are usually doing everything, and they've been used to that because entrepreneurs are doing everything kind of. So it's basically to tell them, okay, guy, you need to stop a bit going into, because now you are at a size where it's a bit less critical that there are other people that can do it for you, the operational stuff. So you need to step a little bit back, not 100% of your time, but you need to dedicate some of your time to really nourish that vision and then go dreaming around in the company to sense how we could evolve, but also outside of the company. And that's one of the big evolution, because then you give much more autonomy to the people. You have less time to be after them, controlling them, and more time to inspire them, actually. And the second big accountability for first link, so this guy leading a team or an organization, is to organize his team so that it's able to get to where it needs to go, which means assigning roles, being vigilant about the culture, about that the values are alive, that everything is really, that people are feeling well. So it's really to have an open ear and sensing into the team, into its needs, and making sure that it's that there is this context that will be the most flourishing for people to really unveil all their talents. So these are two aspects that are usually not really looked into, at least in Europe, and where I put a lot of focus, and which really then gives a sense of, to the organizations, a sense of, okay, now we can breathe, because before we had this manager kind of putting boundaries and it was kind of preventing the full potential to flow, and when you get into really nourishing a vision and creating that context, then the potential of people and the organization can flow freely. And it's at this point that we go into an efficient mode, efficient being getting to a result with the least resource possible.
It sounds very interesting. Who is evaluating performance in that type of structure?
It's a beautiful question, and it's actually usually there is a huge challenge with performance evaluation, is that people are getting into a selective mode. And then also what we say in transactional analysis, it's usually the manager evaluating his collaborator, employee. So you get into this parent-child or teacher-pupil kind of relationship where there is always this, I'm a high level, I'm evaluating you, and you are lower level. So it brings a lot of games, of seduction games, or of hiding things, etc. So it's important that the person being there to bring a context is part of the evaluation, but not being the only one to evaluate, because who is actually at the best seat to evaluate how you work or how do I work is actually my colleagues, my direct colleagues, with whom I'm working every day. So what I'm proposing a lot lately is actually what we call the evaluation, peer-based evaluation, and it's a self-evaluation. So first you evaluate yourself, and it's kind of easy if you take back, if you are still in a job description type of organization, you take what is expected for you. So normally your job description, though usually it's already outdated. So you look at what is expected from you. And then you would just prepare in 3 columns. The first one would be, what do I do good? So what are my successes? And so you list it all around, and then you look at what are my challenges? Where could I still grow? Again, you list it, and then you look at, okay, seeing my successes and my challenges, what are my actions? And then you would put an action plan into you would write it. Then you come with your team leader and a few colleagues. Usually I put 4 or 5 people together, and each so we take 2-3 hours. It takes usually 30 minutes per person to do that. So each in a round would then say, okay, this is so Quentin, you would start. Okay, cool. So I explain to my colleagues what I did well, what are my successes. I list them, and then there is a round with and as many rounds as needed with my colleagues saying, okay, Quentin, I also see that you are good in that. And then another colleague says, I also see that. And so you get a direct feedback from your colleagues. You write it all down, the same for your challenges, and then the same for your action plan. And what is actually really great is that first the manager, it's not this thing it's very usually honest. So people are not hiding or protecting themselves. It's because it's not it's evaluation is another word that is a bit where it's a bit where people usually have it a bit difficulty, because we are used to be evaluated at school and to be and to have grades and to be it's good or bad. Here it's not the objective to say it's good or bad. It's how can we help that person grow. And when we are in that mindset, then people are really genuine into sharing and giving honest feedback. So it's very quickly for a team leader, it's because people talk about how they work in their everyday life, and you can directly see how is the health of my team dynamics, how is every people doing, and where shall I give some attention. And instead of having trainings and that are disconnected from the reality of the employee, then directly you can have, okay, this is my action is to learn to speak publicly, but then I can take on a training to do that, and I can be offered that as a training. Or what I've seen many times is, okay, I'm not very good at prospecting clients, and the colleague in front of him saying, oh, I'm really good at it. I can spend half a day with you and teach you. And so it's this solidarity and this the sharing, this caring of between colleagues is really fostered, because elsewhere in the world, that's in many organizations we've never been so connected, yet people feel very alone and feel usually here you really foster solidarity and then after this after it's done, so it takes 30 to 45 minutes each, then people write it down again and properly, I mean, and they take down the action plan, and usually 6 months after there is at least the minimum is 6 months after, there is a kind of one-to-one with your team leader where you review your action plan and see, okay, do I miss something? Do I need something to continue growing? And then 6 months again later, then you do this evaluation again. Though also what can be also happening is in the team meetings, once a month, for instance, when you have or once every 3 months, we review on the objectives of each, and we check how we can help, or okay, I'm stuck with that, and then we do a little, okay, me in your shoes. So what would I do in your shoes to help you? And so it's many little, very easy things that gives a lot of benefits and beautiful energies. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I can definitely see it to some extent how it works. But like, what if someone is just not good enough, or what if someone is super lazy and not performing? Like how, because my experience with organizations doing something like that, basically what will happen is the people who aren't popular will get a lot of not so good feedback from their colleagues. However, if people are popular and if they're well liked and the likes, even if they're performing badly, the teammates won't tell them.
It's a very good question, though I've done it with roughly 200 people at this point. And what I've always seen, because this popularity or unpopular is always there, so that's international. The thing is, if you ask someone to evaluate himself first and really to auto-assess, usually people are not, they try to be sincere. If they're not, and the feedback is always, if you put a good frame in the beginning saying, okay, we are here to support, we're here, the more honest you will be, the better it will the better results it will leverage. So usually I've never had this thing actually what you're mentioning, that people are would be cheating or really treating someone too well.
What if they're just not good enough? Like, let's say you've hired a sales guy, for example, and the guy is too afraid to talk to human beings or something. So what would happen in a situation like that?
It's an excellent question. So this kind of evaluation methodology is, I would say, the basics. It's evaluation in a way to provide continuous feedback and improvement ways for people to evolve. If out of that the manager sense, okay, there is something here, or he clearly sees the figures, and because he's also giving the feedback at this time. So if you're a sales guy, then it will come also to you evaluate yourself in your soft skills, but also in the figures and the things. So it's an all-rounder evaluation. For a sales guy which is underperforming, and there is this first evaluation where he would come, he would acknowledge that, yeah, his figures are not good because this and that, and then he would set up an action plan. If actually the action plan doesn't work out, so 6 months later you don't see any movement as a team leader, then you have other tools as a one-to-one, and you can get back to more traditional things. But the thing is, first give this space to be more for people to really become more, take their responsibility in front of the others, and give theirs a bit of time and chance to evolve, and give them the support to be, because sometimes with unpopular people or with people that are underperforming, usually it's hard to understand why is that, and there are a lot of factors, and having himself having the time to explain why this is a challenge, or why this or why that, it brings a bit of empathy, because there's this tendency of a good collaborator is this type of guy that is always smiling, always at the coffee machine, always this, always that. So you understand, okay, there are other types of people that work differently than me, so I'm a bit more empathy as a colleague or as a team leader. Knowing the actions that he has, I know better how to lead him. And maybe is this sales guy that is not working or behaving fully like the others, so it's not the typical extrovert, super self confident, and so on and so on. But he maybe has other gifts, and maybe it's not this sales that is good for him. It would be, I see that he will be really good at customer care, or in another role. So that comes back to what we were discussing earlier, is not being stuck into job description based organization where I'm hired as a sales guy and I will be a sales guy all my life until I change job in the organization, towards more role-based organization where I can say, okay, this I can clearly see that I'm less good in that part of the sales job, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And there is another colleague which is really good in that part, so he's going to take that role, and I'm going to take other roles that are more suitable for myself. So you become more agile
that seems to require a very large organization, because I mean, many companies can't just afford to move one person from one place to another. Like,
yes and no. The other day, just before confinement, I had this day, because I usually, with many companies, after I've been following them for some time, then I'm coming back every 3 or 6 months with them and do a bit of stepping back. And there was this thing of, yeah, I like this, but I don't like that. And there was this thing of many people not being very happy with little things. And so I told them, okay, we have 1 hour. What can we do? Just everybody writes down on a Post-it what it likes less or what it doesn't want to do anymore. May it be a project or a role or whatever. And then they were 10 people, something, yeah, roughly 10 people. And so to 10 minutes to write it down, put it in the center, and then people look around and say, but this, I love it, and this, I like it. And then, okay, but if I take your project, then I would need to put that back on the table, and I would need, so you can already stimulate. People usually think, okay, this is his job, he's the marketing guy, so he needs to do it. But there's maybe someone that's really happy to do that, and the marketing guy has been doing it for 3 years and is fed up of doing it. So you can already do it like that, instead of formal roles and formal things. So it can be very, very easy.
I generally work with a concept where I basically say, like, you can have the wrong person for the company and the culture altogether, or you can have the right person but in the wrong role. Right. Yeah. So you can have someone who is a great fit, who is a great individual for the company and matches the personality and the values and so on of the business. Right. And obviously, if you have capacity to have them somewhere else, you can do that. But particularly with smaller businesses, like, a lot of the time, there aren't those roles. Right. But that makes sense. I mean, I can kind of get how that will work around.
And one little parenthesis about what do we do with those people that are really not fitting the culture, so that we cannot put in another role or the task, whatever. There is this thing of many companies sometimes, and certainly for smaller businesses, but I see it even in bigger businesses, they don't even have a clear recruitment process. So they hire a bit like this and that, and you see people and so on, but there is not this thing of when recruiting that you would meet the team and work maybe a bit and test the person. Though I see in small businesses that it's getting better. Then once you know how to get into the company, you need to discuss how do we work, what is the governance inside a company. And this smaller companies, usually 10 to 20 people, it's the time where you start to need to discuss governance and who is doing what and how do we do meetings, because as of 10 people, less than 10 people, it's a bit like we can all fit in the same room, or it's easy to discuss and to be informal. After that, you need a bit more formality. So that's something where I work a lot on, and that's very important. It's where do we go? What are the objectives? What are the roles of each other? How do we meet? Governance meeting, operational meetings, strategic meetings. How do we evaluate ourselves? What is the process for salary rise? What is the whatever? All the processes that needs to be at some point discussed and to be clear, because otherwise. Take it, for instance, for salary rise, and everybody comes and say, yeah, I want this, I want that, and it's easily can become unfair and not transparent, which would then feed distrust and games, and so it's not good for collaboration. But there is one thing that is largely overlooked in organizations. It is the exit process. How do we get out of an organization? Being I'm an employee and I want to get out, so I'm resigning, or firing someone. What is the process to fire someone? So how do we get from me, Quentin, being at my evaluation and being not really performing, to Quentin having his box in his hand and being said goodbye? So that is something that is, for me, it's very important to be discussed and collectively, that people know what are the rules. How, if there is a conflict, for instance, then this will happen, and then if this doesn't work, then this process will happen, and then this process, and if still it doesn't work, then you're fired. But you know the rules, and you know you can at all time relate to, okay, this is where I am, and you know that it's going to be fair, because there are going to be the process is going to be the same for everyone. There is no privilege. There is no like you more, so okay, it's good, but the other employee, if you do that, then you would be directly fired. So this equity, which is very important, and when people know the rules and know how to get in, how to stay, how to work properly together, and how to get out intentionally and non-intentionally, then this thing of being in a safe environment to work is already much more fostered.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I mean, so basically, when I go through things with clients, right, it sounds very much like this sounds really like good management to a certain extent, right? There's definitely some more self-ownership than what I would typically teach, but it sounds like if people actually sit down and spend the time learning some good management, that is a long way, right? But I think, I mean, it sounds interesting particularly from a governance perspective. But I think I could definitely see some areas where I feel it will be challenging. But again, it's hard to know exactly before you've tried it. So what's typically the size of organizations where you've seen the most success with this model?
Well, if you take, first of all, there is it's kind of more largely being discussed in this now worldwide famous book from Frédéric Laloux. It's basically working in all types of organizations. If you look in Laloux's book, it's small businesses towards international networks of multinationals, I mean, or networks type of organizations. So it's working everywhere. Though if you are in a larger company, actually what you build is instead of having a big Titanic, you build speedboats and or mini mills, mini factories where people actually can stay into a size which is where they can still know each other and where they can grasp also. They're not like a little fish in the huge ocean. They're more in a small pond where you know each other and where it's more safe for you to work. So it's working everywhere. My core business, where I like it the most to implement it and where it's actually go fast, because I've been doing it for a large organization in Belgium. There are 1,500 plus employees. And there it's really, when you do something, you need to go to go process, steering committees, this and that, and a lot of hierarchical barriers before you move. When you're an SME, then you discuss with the CEO, with the team, and then, okay, let's do it. And we do it. So it's no bullshit, no PowerPoints, direct action. And I said just before confinement games, I was in a meeting with a small company here in Belgium called List Minute, and they are like they are in this phase where they become 15, where they were super caring before about the employees, doing like every month the CEO would sit with everyone, and so they were too much into caring and not efficient enough. And now you just can't do it anymore because they are growing. And I told him they do this 5 days retreats every year. And I told him in 5 days, you can already fully redesign your organization, being in subgroups and doing that and that and that. And have clear processes for you to work really perfectly after. And it's not a recipe that fits all. It's principles, how I like to call it, how to take good decisions, how to do good evaluations, how to appoint someone to a role, how to structure info, structure meetings, and then you just take on what is fitting to your culture, and you let. That's why I like to join participatory management, dynamics, governance. So all these new models with what is called collective intelligence. It's actually to transform that into. This is not a truth that I'm giving you and this is the recipe that you should follow, because usually then it doesn't match the culture. It's transforming it into how can we, for instance, if you take the evaluation thing, how can we have evaluation where we help each other, where we bring back solidarity, which are really giving this supporting people in their growth, instead of being this moment where you are scared once a year and when you try to dress well and to impress. And so there, collectively, people start thinking, and my role is then to that they do this trajectory of actually we could see evaluation differently, and how could it be if we would do that and that and that. And Quentin, do you know about any technique, by the way? Yes, I know one. This okay, then cool, let's do it. So this is also a big shift that I see in over here, is less and less consultants, more and more coaching approach, kind of. So asking the right question, and sometimes feeding a bit, okay, because it's not their job. I see it every day, so I can say, yeah, these techniques work well for that kind of client, so it could work well here, but maybe you need to adapt to your reality and to your context.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I see, like,
everywhere.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I've worked in the largest organizations like IBM and so on, right? And what I've always found the biggest issue is really, more than anything, this lack of management training, right? And I can definitely see a big part of this thing is obviously going and actually giving people tools, right? And that's obviously beneficial, because what I see consistently in pretty much every organization I work with is, people are put into these management roles, and it's kind of like, Friday morning when you go home, you're an employee, and Monday morning when you come in, you're a manager. And there, in very few organizations, there's a good workflow for actually giving you training and support as a manager. And I think, from my experience, that's where most of bad management come from, because there isn't that support for managers to actually learn. So, my rule of thumb is always, when people wake up in the morning, they go to work to do a good job. If they aren't doing a good job, it's not on purpose. It's because they either don't have the skill set, they haven't got the training, etc. Right? And therefore, when you have a bad manager, it's usually not because they're a bad individual or a bad person, but it's usually a question of they haven't been given the training, right? And I can totally see, like, doing something like this, I can totally see how actually giving people the skills and the tools will make a huge difference, right? Because it's very similar to some extent to what I do, but I think it definitely sounds like a very interesting approach, right? Because it sounds very different. I still probably have a difficulty visioning it, but that doesn't mean it's not possible, right? It just means it's very different than from what I've seen in the past. So it sounds very interesting.
I've had that the other day. It's for actual managers and new managers. So it's really what is more and more a practice in companies that are getting more horizontal and more collaborative, is to have also these peer communities. And one of the peer communities is definitely the management community. So indeed, if you are on a Friday morning still an employee, then Monday morning you are a manager, then you had barely the weekend to think about what kind of manager do I want to be? How is it to manage a team? What do I do when I have a problem? What is actually my role? How much of time do I need to spend into that? And do I still need to do a lot of things? Do I need to be an expert, not an expert? So it's a lot of things, and that is definitely a worldwide trend. The higher you get in the hierarchy, usually the loneliest you feel. And so bringing back those communities and getting people ask themselves the right questions allows them to raise their consciousness and to support each other, and then to become these good leaders or managers or directors, whatever. I like the term director, actually, because in director you have this sense of direction. So I'm the one giving the direction. But it's important to get into the role and to really digest it and to feel and to have this feedback loop that is constant. And it can be through an external coach, though what I find the most lasting, because it's not the purpose of a company to always be paying for external resources to coach the people. It's to give autonomy into communities, to have this self-peer coaching, which is really lasting and beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always, after I started working for myself, I've really found out that, like, a company like McDonald's, for example, are, I think they're world famously known for having good management training, and it works every time. Like I've hired a number of people who've previously worked in McDonald's, and it's just every time they come with a really good skill set, right? Because they have a strong culture, a strong training, and sort of background, and it's so obvious compared to pretty much any other management hires that I've had, that they have a just totally different foundation, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of other companies out there doing good management training, but
absolutely, and you can train as a manager in different kind of consciousness level. I don't know if you know about spiral dynamics, this model about, and so you can train to be a manager in the orange level, in the blue level, in the green level, or in the teal level. It's different consciousness level brings a different type of management style. So I would be curious to, a McDonald's employee could be really, really well trained. Maybe they are trained as orange managers and they're really good at that. But if you put them into a more complex, more greenish or teal or yellow environment, would they still be good managers? And over your life, some person evolve in an organization. Normally, if it would be sane, it would evolve in consciousness or maturity, and the more it evolves, the more it's able to deal with this VUCA world where we are living in, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world where we are living. So for me, it's a lifelong journey, and I think many organizations are really proud of their management courses. Though when discussing, there is a big French energy provider that I'm discussing with, and I know they were completely reviewing the academy. Though they were really successful and known to be really providing really good managers, but it's managers more for the 20th century and not 21st century management. So lots of opportunities, lots of changes, but what I see is it's the more we get into that, the more people are becoming more happy at work, because at the end of the day, it's work is the space and the place where we spend most of our life. So, and after that, it's bed. So we need to have a good bed and a good work environment, really unleashing all our potential.
Yeah, I like it. That sounds very interesting. So what's when you bring in new companies to this model, like what is the length of a process to evolve into something like this?
It always depends on the size of the company and on the willingness of the company to move, to take time, basically, because change or evolution is a simple equation. It equals time times consciousness. So you can be conscious. Some leaders know about these new models and they want to implement and know that they want to do something differently. But if you know and you don't take time to implement it, then nothing will happen. And some people have a lot of time, but they don't know that something else is possible, so they continue to do it the same way. So the first thing is, are you ready to take a bit of time? It doesn't mean a full-time, it's not a full-time job, but in the first month, you need to at least have, what I usually start with small organization is a 2-day outdoor session, meaning outdoor outside of your company, where really dive into the basics, building trust, unleashing allowing people to share what they really feel. So building this container where people can share, start exploring, okay, how is it to work now? What are we good at? Where can we improve? And the basics, and give a strong basis. And then it's, we say usually, and when I say we, it's most organizational coaches that are working into implementing these kind of things, is a cultural change, because here it's really a cultural change, because you change values, or you make sure those values are actually alive, because usually it's we write a lot of some beautiful things on the wall and then, okay, homework done, now let's forget about them. So this cultural change takes 3 to 5 years. So that's a long process, though you can see benefits of it quite quickly, only already by, because usually after such 2 days, one of the things that comes in 90% of the cases is we hate how we meet. We need really to reinvent those meetings, make them more efficient, make them more alive, participatory, whatever. And already by changing that, you change the way that people listen to each other, and the way that people interact, the way that tasks are divided, decisions are taken. And already in 6 months, if you take a bit of time to explore that, and to make it yours, and in 6 months you already see a lot of effects. After 2 days, you already see a lot of effects, because people have been talking to each other like never before. You've been digging into sometimes conflicts that were there for years, and eventually it comes on the table, and okay, it's not that bad. What does that mean? How is it an opportunity for us to evolve and to make things better? And so it's a beautiful journey. The only thing is, I've had that with a company last year, consultants working. They didn't have at all an organization model, so it was quite. The first requirement for them was not to really too much work on the cultural aspects, but more on the structural aspects. So who is doing what, where, what are the roles, how do we interact together, so more the structure. So we did that. Then came, they lost one of the biggest clients, so the whole priority shifted, and they were into this survival mode. And so for more than 6 months, they put that aside. So basically, once you start working on something and building a new energy, a new dynamic, then it's important to work on it while it's hot. And if you give too much time in between things, then you always need to reactivate and to rebuild on things. And then the thing is, if you make promises as a leader, saying, okay, now we're going to go that direction, the new values I want to promote is transparency, is confidence, is trust, this is our new dream, where really you start federating people around a great project. Because usually when you tell people that, most people, because some people like to be told what to do, but usually when you tell people you'll have more autonomy, more relationships will be better, and you'll be able to do really what makes you thrive, then usually they're happy. So it's a nice project. But if you start it and then at some point either say, okay, stop, or you go backwards, or whatever, then you create expectations and then disappointments, and then it's counterproductive. So it's to be done in a period where you feel bits, at least, because usually people ask me, and I'm usually the firefighter here, because they've been trying many things and it doesn't work, or the situation is it's almost explosive. So something needs to be done. So there is already tension. But if you are really striving to survive and you have no more money and you need to find a new client and whatever high priority, and you cannot take your head away from that priority, then wait a bit to start it. Though sometimes it can be good to, if it's a huge hell and a huge mess, to say to use other ways to get out of the hole. Yep. So that's a different type of coaching. It's really then a kind of crisis coaching, where you're really there to help them say, okay, let's take a bit of distance, and how can we elaborate a strategy to survive. So it's less governance, it's more strategic than, but always using coaching approach, which means asking them the right question instead of a consultancy approach, which would be then in that case, this is what you need to do. But the problem is when you tell people that this is what they need to do, usually they don't do it because it doesn't come from them, or it comes from the manager and the consultant, but the team says, bullshit, or why didn't they ask me, don't they trust me, or whatever. There are lots of things when it comes from external sources. Sometimes it's really needed because we don't have it internally, but then it's a team decision to say, okay, we're going to ask that expert to give us an advice or this and that. But for me, most of the things when it comes to how do we survive, how do we organize, how do we find a strategy, how do we get new clients, etc., then I found that it's really much more productive and less costly to ask the people and to create a context to let it emerge, because people deal with those kind of problems every day and they know it.
Yep, that makes sense. Quentin, I think we are nearly at the end here, but it has been a super interesting conversation. If people are eager to get hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
So what I guess, I don't know if you give with the podcast,
we'll put in the show notes and everything.
Yeah. but definitely they can have a look at www.mangochutney.eu, all in one word. Then there you will find all my contact info. I'm reachable via email, phone, Zoom, Skype, whatever is convenient. And definitely it's a passion. So it doesn't need to be, I want to work with you. It's, I have a question, I don't know. It's, to me, it's, I'm sharing day and night about this thing, and I could do that freely if world was a place without money. But, so yeah, I'm very happy, and even to have, because I'm sure there are some coaches or organizational coaches listening to me in the car, to have your testimonial about how you do that. How do you?
Excellent. That is excellent. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.